So thank you for the welcome and thank you for the opportunity to explain, just as our bishop asked, to try to explain what is the Migrants and Refugees section. So I will do a bit of explaining, and then Father Fabio will explain more deeply what is our mission and our orientation. But let me begin with an image of our times. I don't have to tell you who these people are, but I do want to tell you that this is an Italian Coast Guard vessel, and that the picture was given to me by the captain. And the captain not only gave me this moving image, but he also showed me the GPS view of the Mediterranean. And he showed me that the European defense forces were all located at a distance from the route that the migrants are taking. In other words, that the defense forces of Europe are avoiding encounter with the people who are trying to reach these shores. To me, this is a very sad parable of our situation. And I was happy to be taken into the confidence of this public official who I think is giving his life for these people. But I was very sad to notice a kind of official refusal to accept the reality of our times, and a preference for a certain kind of comfort or security as being more important than saving life. This young man once was a friend, a colleague of mine when I was working in Africa on AIDS. He was an idealistic young man. He helped me very much with very ambitious and generous program in the slums, helping people to resist and to overcome HIV/AIDS. And then he disappeared from view, and I found out later, as we can see, that he went to the seminary in the United States and was ordained a priest and is serving in a diocese in the United States. But unfortunately, as happens to many people, his papers were messed up and he never got a residence permit. And so when he leaves to go visit the sick, or when he drives to a parish meeting, he tells me now he never knows whether he will actually get back to his parish house and continue his life, or whether he will be picked up and shipped back home. But he says that if he is picked up and shipped back home, he will work with migrants and refugees in his home country, because he now knows what it is like to live with that fear. And I think for me that's also an important image, and perhaps an image that helps to explain why Father Fabio and I are here, because for Pope Francis, this fear, this insecurity, this exclusion, this rejection is something that we cannot tolerate, that we cannot allow, that we have to find ways of overcoming. So, as Bishop Sanchez Sorondo asked, here are the origins of our section. In mid-August, Pope Francis pulled together 4 pontifical councils that dealt with some of the major social sectors of our time, or of any time really. Pontifical Council for Health, Pontifical Council for Migrants and Itinerant Peoples, Pontifical Council for Emergency Relief and Charities, Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, which includes ecology, human rights, economics, war and peace, and so forth. And he pulled them together into a new dicastery. Dicastery is a Vatican word for department. A new dicastery for promoting integral human development. And this dicastery is dedicated, and now I will follow Jeffrey Sachs's very good example and quote from Populorum Progressio of Pope Paul VI, which we know today is its 50th birthday. This is the Pope's definition of integral development, the fullest development of the whole person and of every person. The whole person and of every person, or as he put it a bit more graphically but politically incorrectly, the whole man and every man. And I think it's not only a challenge but a reminder that no one can say, I'm okay, as long as many others are not okay. It's simply that our human condition ties us together, and that to claim that we have achieved something when when others are excluded is to deny, is to put the lie to our claim. It's to put the lie to our claim. So if we had another extra day, we would meditate on what is integral human development and how that is indeed the fundamental response to the so-called crisis in migration and refugees, but we won't do that. However, at the moment in mid-August when the Holy Father established the new dicastery, he said that within it there would be a section on migrants and refugees, which would, as it says here, pay special attentions to the issues pertinent to the needs of those who are forced to flee their homeland or have none, and he could have added, or who are victims of human trafficking and modern slavery. And I think it's probably obvious that the new dicastery should have a section on migrants and refugees, and in that sense it was an obvious remark. But what was not so obvious is that he added that for the time being, and in a way that he would reveal later, this section would be under his personal direction. So the section on migrants and refugees is hosted within the new dicastery. We are part of the new dicastery. Our staff are staff persons of the new dicastery, but our orientation, our direction, and our motivation, if you like, come directly from the Holy Father and are part of our section's life, an important part of our section's life. So Father Fabio and I are very privileged to be involved so directly with the Holy Father in carrying out this particular mission. Maybe I could use, instead of using the official words that are there on the slide, maybe I could put our mission in somewhat more subjective terms. Now, this is not something that Pope Francis actually told us, but it is what I think we imagine could have been in his mind when he decided to set up a section under his direct direction, working on this topic. And it is this, and I trust that this might be useful for our discussions also. It is as if he said, I am leading as best I can lead. I am setting the pace, in a sense. I'm orienting morally, but given my other job requirements, I am not able myself to undertake the next step. And I think that our section's job is to help him to see to it that the next steps are taken. So we, in a sense, go from his teaching, his example, his inspiration, to try to discover the next steps. And so our mission is well focused. It's to assist the church, as it says here, the bishops, the faithful, the clergy, church organizations, and everyone else who's interested to accompany these four categories of people: those who are deciding to flee, those who are in transit or waiting, those who are arriving and seeking to integrate, and those who are in the process of returning. And as Father Fabio will explain then, this meaning of to accompany is spelled out by the Holy Father himself at the beginning of this year in these 4 phases: to welcome, to protect, to promote, and to integrate. I ask myself if those 4 words mightn't be a good checklist for any program or proposal that we are going to be agreeing on or recommending. Our effort is to help, and we have made a very strong commitment to social media, to electronic technology, because in bringing the Holy Father's message and leadership to people, we need to reach them. And so in our work, communication is very important, and you can see the points made here. I don't have to go through them, but I will say that we make a very strong commitment to assisting the media. It's easy to blame the media, especially for the xenophobia and the other short-sighted reactions that get fomented. But I think every time we criticize, we could also ask ourselves what we've done to supply them with the truth, or with alternative narratives, or with alternative images. And I think if we would supply them with as much stuff as they're getting from the forces of darkness, we maybe would have a better attitude, public attitude in this delicate area. And so, as often happens when an organization speaks, we encourage you to visit our website, which is designed in a special way to meet the needs of journalists and to be accessible to people who are willing to hear, you might say, the other side of the story. This is the address of the website. As always, you're very welcome to visit. We will be working on, now we will have a staff of about 10 or a dozen, and we will try to do these things that are listed in the next steps. But I just mention the 3rd step, that regarding the process towards the global compacts, we've made a very strong commitment to being part of that process, and we will do our best to, especially to help the bishops in every country and in every region, to be aware of the process, and so that they can be present to their governments and help their governments to understand what we, the people, expect the global compacts to contain and to promote. And so I thank you for your attention, and I invite my colleague and co-undersecretary to further develop what it is that we are trying to do in cooperation with the Holy Father.
I title my contribution, Pope Francis' Response, Ethics in Action. And I think it's one good example that we can quote today about how ethical principles and ethical values can be translated into practice and into action. Before the complex migration scenario, which is marking the beginning of the 3rd millennium, Pope Francis felt the need to express his particular concern for the forced nature of many contemporary migration movements, which increases the challenges presented to the political community, to the civil society, and to the Church, and which amplifies the urgency for a coordinated and effective response to these challenges. In his address to the participants in the International Forum on Migration and Peace, delivered on the 21st February 2017, the Holy Father summarized the response to be provided to such challenges in 4 verbs. They are already mentioned by Father Michael: to welcome, to protect, to promote, and to integrate. The pontifical address constitutes a good example of ethics in action, as Pope Francis starts recalling some relevant ethical principles derived from the treasures of the social doctrine of the Church, and then declines them into concrete and contextualized actions. The first verb is to welcome. The ethical principle of solidarity is a common heritage of religions and secular ethics. The Catholic doctrine grounds this principle on the universal destination of goods, which corresponds to a precise determination of a supreme creator. Moving from this principle, the Holy Father invites to overcome indifference and defensiveness and to counter fears and discrimination with a generous approach of welcoming all migrants and refugees who knock at our doors. The sacred duty of hospitality is historically based on solidarity as a capacity to understand others' needs and take responsibility for them. The duty of hospitality is also based on the value of fraternity, which constitutes a common patrimony of humanity and wisdom. The acknowledgement that every human being is a brother and a sister qualifies the encounter with each of them as significant because it represents an opportunity to grow in one's relational dimension. In human history, encounters among peoples gave birth to new civilizations. The Holy Father encourages to promote a sound culture of encounter, which is the only culture capable of building a better, more just and fraternal world. Allow me to add something to the written presentation that I anticipated to the organizer, saying that from the section and with the blessing of the Holy Pope, of the Pope Francis, we are strongly supporting the Human Corridors programs. We are strongly supporting the sponsorship programs around the world with the different models which are actually have been undertaken by different countries and collective and private sponsorship programs. We are strongly supporting also the scholarship provided to refugee students in order to get visa and go and eventually study in other countries. And many other programs were being enacted, and we are collecting all of them, we are documenting them, and then trying to feature them in our website so that they can be replicated. To protect, the ethical principle of the respect for human rights has been codified in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The two related covenants, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and a good number of international conventions. All the rights are not assigned, but recognized to every person equally and inalienably. Declarations, covenants, and conventions state the inalienability and inviolability of the rights that belongs to every single human being according to the principle of no discrimination. Every migrant is a human person who possesses all codified rights which must be respected in every circumstance. The Holy Father recalls everybody's duty to defend migrants' inalienable rights, ensuring their fundamental freedoms. It is a moral imperative which should be translated into fair juridical instruments at both international and national levels. Migrant protection starts from fighting against human trafficking with timely and effective programs. The ethical principle of the protection of human dignity refers to the spatial position of each human being within the universe. The social doctrine of the Church grounds of dignity on the creation of all human beings in the image of God. From a more immanent perspective, some authors ground the same principle on the concept of freedom, which characterize individually all human beings, making them able to choose and self-impose norms that are considered universal. The Holy Father refers to this principle when he calls for a responsible and dignified welcome of migrants and refugees, which begins by assuring a decent and appropriate shelter Pope Francis also recalls that the upholding of migrants' essential dignity cannot be obscured by the lack of fulfillment of administrative requirements. And so, allow me to add that the section strongly support any kind of program which is alternative to detention of children and migrants, any kind of program which is actually upholding their rights and their dignity, giving them chance to work wherever they are, and so to earn their life. So we also strongly support what we call disseminated welcome, which is the welcome done by small groups, by small communities, families welcomed in different suburbs, different families welcoming migrants and refugees. We are strongly supporting programs of extraordinary regularization of irregular or unauthorized migrants in the different countries. To promote personal and family development is an undeniable right of every human being. It must be guaranteed by ensuring the necessary condition for its exercise, namely fair access to fundamental goods for all. The Holy Father stresses the importance of promoting the integral human development of migrants and refugees in the countries of origin, transit, and destination. Before the right to migrate, states have to guarantee the rights not to have to migrate. As Pope John Paul II stated in 1988, it is a basic human right to live in one's own country. However, these rights become effective only if the factors that urge people to emigrate are constantly kept under control. The application of the principle of the universal destination of Earth's goods has relevant results also in terms of promotion. Pope Francis states that the apportionment of such goods at the global level should be always guided by the precept of distributive justice and shared stewardship. To such extent, the international cooperation programs must be free from any partisan interest. The Holy Father also encourages the implementation of programs of transnational development with the involvement of migrants as main stakeholders. Allow me to add that upholding, protecting, or promoting the right to stay, not to have to migrate, is a fighting for sustainable development, which should be localized, contextualized, inclusive, and for all, which have to see the locals as main actors, not just as beneficiaries of the programs. We strongly support all these transnational efforts which have been done by several governments, privates, and organizations in starting local projects of development, trying to eliminate the evil root causes of forced migration. To integrate. Integration, not to be confused with assimilation, is a process by which the contents of one's original culture are preserved and integrated with selected contents of others' culture. Related to international migration, integration is to be understood as a two-way process where the autochthonous group is called to accept the cultural changes brought about by migrants, as well as foreign groups are called to accept the changes produced by the encounter with the host society. Pope Francis highlights that this process, to be successful, entails the recognition of the other's cultural richness. Hosting society should enact programs that promote significant encounters with others. The social doctrine of the Church states that the relational dimension of human beings is essential to their fulfillment. As a consequence, one's fulfillment essentially depends on others' fulfillment, because the lack of fulfillment of the others ultimately affects interpersonal relationships. According to Pope Francis, this consideration should lead us to relate to each migrant and refugee as a true sister or brother, to love, care, and integrate. Such concrete expression of fraternity is a must if we aim at building a just and cohesive society and a solid and lasting peace. And the Pope encourages, and we with the Pope, all kinds of initiatives which are producing a significant encounter among people and society. We have to build up spaces within our society where people are free to express who they are, to tell their stories. And this is why, what Father Michael said before, our main effort with the social media is to widespread the good news, not the bad ones. Because the bad ones, unfortunately, are running quite fast, using all the other medias. What is not told at all are the good stories of migrants and refugees, and they are the majorities, not the minorities. And they are there to develop and to contribute to development to the hosting society, and if they can, also to the society of origins. Thank you.
Thank you both. Are there any questions for Father Michael or Father Fabio? Seeing none, let me thank you for that very informative presentation and call on Jeff.
How can we help you?
I think that maybe the most concrete thing I can say is that you maybe discover or recognize with our presentation that the center of gravity of this thing is not here, but in the countries of the world out there. And that what you can do to help the bishops and the other constituencies that I listed to understand and pick up this problematic is very, very important. A centralized solution is not promising. And that's one reason why we're on a bit of a campaign to drop the expression global refugee crisis and global migration crisis. They are neither global nor are they crises. And in that sense, to bring it home and bring it down also makes it, puts it within reach of far more people. And I think that bringing it down to its variety, to its pluralism, to its humanity is a very important thing. So I would say that localize, in this case, localize is one way of helping to, I think, to achieve what the Holy Father wants, which is that what we mean by the word accompany becomes real.
Michael, we in the academy, and we thought of also with friends, not necessarily academicians, and, as you know, organized many meetings about the question of the new form of slaves, in the form of forced labor, prostitution, traffic of organs, and organized crime and these things. And we have two main goals. First one is to understand the phenomena and the extension of the phenomena, and maybe the localization of more important part of the phenomena. And the second, and then, what is the reason that we say that this is a crime against humanity? And what is the sufferance, not only physical, but only moral sufferance of these people? So this is one thing. And the other thing is to try to individualize, to discover what are the best practice, what are the excellency, we can say, that today some countries, or combination of the states and private people, are already do. And for example, we say for the question of prostitution, that is the more complicated, we say that the Sweden model is the best, because for the first time in the history, not only penalize the victim, but penalize the customs. And we say, for example, that the model to have when activist of Mexico is very good, because have a sort of protocol to reinsert the people in the normal way, in the normal work of the society. And also we find in Baton Rouge a very nice model of collaboration between the church, the priest, and one priest, and the bishop, and also the governor, and many other people, all the public opinion help and this kind of things. So there are models that we can show in the case of the human trafficking, that we can show. And for example, for the question of refugees, we can say the thing that to do the governor of St. Louis is a model. It's a model that we can put. Look, because if the people don't know models concretely that they are going well, it's not easy to say what is the solution. So we need to discover if there are models concretely also in this field. What do you think? Thank you.
Yeah, I agree very much. I think maybe it's just a question of nuance, but in what we've been doing so far, we tend not to use the word model as much as good practices, because a good practice gives you the idea that you will have to figure out how to do it yourself, whereas a model can be a bit distancing, as if you have to adopt the model. So I would say one thing would be to in a sense, just to make your list longer. You listed 3 examples, but we need lists of 3,000 and 30,000 examples, because there are many different situations. Secondly, I think we need to accept the fact that modern slavery is also a function of an unregulated market. The slave drivers are following very fundamental market principles. They are orthodox on the market. They're not especially, they're not in a special sector. They're in the mainstream of market ideology. And I think that unless we face the fact that they will continue to flourish applying market principles, we're not going to be able to stop them. So the idea of going after the traffickers looks good and maybe would enhance someone's reputation, but it will certainly not snuff out the market. They will simply change routes and they will raise the price and they will make more money. And so I'm very skeptical of sort of one-sided efforts to go after them as criminals, as opposed to the harder work of squeezing them out of the market. You can squeeze them out of the slavery market by providing better paying, decent jobs, something which seems a bit beyond reach right now, but nevertheless, it is the real solution, whereas penalizing the marketeers is not going to result. I think we've discovered how human trafficking and interplays with the flow of migrants, and we have to admit that in a certain sense, the traffickers are simply meeting demand with supply and are providing transportation where other forms are not available. And that would be my second point. And the third point is that I think we should more often consult the sisters who work with the victims, because I think they know the reality better than most. And I have the fear that they're not often listened to.
Dr. Samak.
Yeah. Just a small remark. I noticed with appreciation, actually, that one item of the goals of this new initiative is, and I try to quote, to help those who want to return. That's excellent, but I believe it would be much better if it addresses the process of return, to help the process of return, not only those who want to return. And this will give it more let me say, engagement in helping the whole issue, not only individuals. Thank you.
Just another question on help. We are more or less a network of networks here. And if there is some use and help in identifying which countries and areas of your focus where you're operationalizing things, if universities, for example, could play some role in documentation or research or reporting for you, that's one particular network that we have here. So I'd be very open to receiving, here are our challenges, especially since you're only 10 covering all of these, or so covering this vast range. And I know you have a great network also, but we tap into business, the World Business Council of Sustainable Development, the universities in these countries, and other parts of civil society that might be able to give a hand locally.
Okay, time for a break. Thanks.